The topic today is CONTRAvirus. I am so pleased to introduce our speaker, Dr. Michael Wild. The topic could not be more appropriate and timely. He will be talking with us today about ways to naturally protect ourselves against any viral illness. Dr. Wild, chiropractor, is a local holistic doctor specializing in cellular inflammation and detoxification, who uses his 30-plus years of experience in chiropractic, functional medicine, and biohacking to help prevent, stop, and even reverse the 5 top killers in America, namely cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, and autoimmune dysfunction. Dr. Wild received his undergraduate degree from Boston College, where he graduated at the top of his class while concentrating on psychophysiology, the brain-body connection, within the pre-med program. He was then granted his doctorate of chiropractic from New York Chiropractic College in 1991 and began helping people lead healthier, happier lives through his private practice. He has continued his exploration of natural healing through hundreds of hours of continuing education and uses this knowledge to help others through his 3 local businesses, Wild Chiropractic Care, Dr. Wild's Wellness Consulting, and his latest creation, the Biohack Zone. The Biohack Zone is a unique chiropractic and cellular health center here in Richmond, which uses minimum time to get you maximum results in decreasing stress, increasing strength, optimizing appearance, and enhancing health. Please join me now in welcoming Dr. Wild.
Hey, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And Jessica, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come and speak today about obviously an extremely important topic. Now, I'm going to give you guys a couple of warnings before I get started. I'm originally from New York, so I have a tendency to speak up to 60 miles an hour with gusts up to 100. So try to stick with me. Also, this is designed to be a 1-hour presentation, which I'm trying to condense down to about a half hour, so we leave time for questions and answers. So I'm going to fly through some of the material, but there will be an opportunity for you to receive a copy of this entire presentation so you can read it at your leisure and take the time to actually absorb the information. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to get into our presentation. And let's just get this going from the beginning. Okay, whoop. All right, here we go. All righty, let me see if I can bring this up out of the way. Fantastic. So as Jessica was saying, the title today of our presentation is CONTRAvirus, Natural Methods to Protect Yourself from Any Viral Illness. Now, obviously, we all have one particular virus on our mind nowadays, but I think it's important to realize that this is just one of many that have come before and will come again. So it's important for us to understand how to best protect ourselves. And over my approximately 30 years of practice and working with thousands of different patients at this point, I've come to realize that most people don't even have a clue of what a virus is, let alone how it enters your cells and what you can do to boost your immunity and protect your cells and recover faster from a viral illness. So I hope that I'm going to teach you some new information today, and I hope that you really enjoy it. All right, so let's follow along. Well, you already got my background, so I don't have to go into all that information. Jessica was nice enough to give a very thorough explanation of that. As we move forward, let's talk about what viruses are, okay? Now, viruses are technically tiny bits of genetic material wrapped in protein envelopes, capable of hijacking your cellular machinery, not just yours, but plants and animals as well, and even bacteria for self-replication. What the heck does that mean? That means that viruses are bits of information, much like software. And that's why when we have abnormal software, bad software taking over our computers, we call it a computer virus, not a computer bacteria, okay? It's actually a very similar process. So when the virus takes over your computer, it gets into the software, the programming of your computer, and when you get bad information in, you end up getting bad information out, and so you end up with a result that you're not very happy with. Well, the same thing happens when a virus gets into our body. So let's talk specifically about the particular elephant in the room, the coronavirus. Now, this virus, as we know, is called a novel coronavirus because it's a version of a SARS coronavirus that we've seen before, but it has a different type of spike protein on its exterior. If we go back for a second, this little stuff we see here, these are the spike proteins they're referring to. So the spike protein is what makes it slightly different than SARS. Now, one of the things we have to be concerned about is that this particular virus is spread through aerosolization, which means it goes through the air, right? And we're all becoming painfully aware of that. Because of that, we are starting to wear masks, we're wearing gloves, we're trying to protect ourselves from coming in contact with the virus. But the reality is that everything we do to protect ourselves cannot fully protect us from the virus because it is in the air. So unless we all decide we're going to stop breathing completely for a good long period of time, which would solve a lot of problems for most of us, unfortunately, we're not going to get away from it. Okay? So we're going to have to learn a little bit more about what we can do about it. Now I'm going to try to get this a little bit out of the way here if I can. There we go. So we can see a little bit better. Okay. So if we look at the actual coronavirus itself and we do a little anatomy lesson here and we cut it open and look inside, what we see is inside the center of the virus, what we have here is known as our RNA protein. Now you guys might remember from back in high school that within our genetics, we have DNA and RNA. DNA tells a cell what its job is. RNA tells a cell how to reproduce itself or replicate. Now, a virus is, in this particular case, a retrovirus, is one that contains RNA or replication information. And that is engulfed here in an envelope made up of these spike proteins and also of lipid or fats. Okay, and that's what we've got going on here. Now, if we look at a model of the human cell, we see that human cell has an outer membrane, much like the skin that covers the outside of your body. And just like your skin has pores where things can get in, such as maybe nice nutrients like vitamin E you might rub on your skin, and waste can get out like toxins in your sweat. The cells, membranes themselves, also have pores that enable nutrients and hormone signaling to get in and waste products to get out. Now, what happens in the case of a virus is that virus comes along and attaches to the outside of the cell here. That virus then enters the cell. Once that virus is inside the cell, the virus starts to break down its own components and releases its contents, that RNA we were talking about. That RNA then gets into the center of the cell, which is the nucleus. And within that nucleus is the nucleolus where we actually have our DNA and RNA. So inside that cell, the RNA of that cell is supposed to tell that cell how to reproduce. But instead, the virus releases its own RNA, which gets into the nucleus. That then hijacks our own cell, hijacks our own genetics, and causes the nucleus to start reproducing and creating new viruses. Those viruses then become fully formulated and eventually exit the cell, and the cell usually dies as the end result. Now that virus then goes on to infect another cell, and so on and so on. So that's how viruses actually do their damage to us. They take over our cells, we become a host, and like a parasite, they start using us for their own evil plan. So as that virus takes over our cells, it leads to cellular death and damage, and ultimately the host, the whole person, if the virus is strong enough, can die. Well, how bad is this virus? Okay, well, if you look at this, we talk about and hear about it's so contagious. We all have to be so terribly fearful. Well, the reality is it is fairly contagious, okay, but it's not much different than the typical flu. The numbers are about the same as far as how many other people one person is able to infect. As a matter of fact, there are lots of things that are far more contagious, such as that SARS we were talking about, HIV, mumps, polio, smallpox. Look at measles. Measles is way more contagious, and yet the whole world isn't freaking out over the rest of these things the way we have freaked out over this, okay? Particularly because we get very concerned about the number of people who are dying from it, not so much the amount of times it's spread. Now, the reason we're concerned about the number of people dying from it is it seems to be particularly virulent, especially in an elderly or immunocompromised population, much like the regular flu. Unfortunately, that population of people are going to be a bit weaker, and therefore they're going to be more susceptible to succumbing to any kind of viral infection, especially something that is particularly affecting the lungs. So I just want to ask a quick question. Are you guys being blocked in what you're seeing here by the images at the bottom of the screen? Okay, I am, so I'm going to get rid of that. Oh, that's much better. Okay, great. Now I can actually see what I'm talking about. Okay, so what we want to talk about is, so how do you know if you have a coronavirus, COVID-19 versus a flu, or if it's just allergies? Well, some of the symptoms that we see are very similar, and there is a crossover here. such as with coronavirus and the flu. Both have a fever, both have a cough, okay? Now, the difference is with coronavirus, you end up with shortness of breath, and the symptoms take a bit longer usually to appear, about 2 weeks versus just a few days for the flu. And you notice the flu, usually when people have the flu, they get really achy in their muscles and their joints, where in coronavirus, it's really impacting more the lungs. And that's because each virus, programmed into its own genetics, has a propensity to grow better inside certain types of cells. Flu virus grows better inside muscles and joints, and that's why it sets up shop there. And as your immune system attacks it, that immune attack actually creates those symptoms you're experiencing and actually creates that fever and the pain and aches that you're feeling. That's actually signs that your immune system is ramping up and doing its job. In the case of coronavirus, it means it's going to your lungs and you end up with shortness of breath. You end up with inflammation of your delicate lung tissue, which thickens that lung tissue. And the most recent explanation I've seen that makes the most sense to me is that coronavirus actually gets into your red blood cells themselves, right where the oxygen exchange is taking place in your lungs. And the oxygen is supposed to be coming through the lungs and into the red blood cells, so your red blood cells can then carry that oxygen to every other part of your body as a vital means of survival for every cell in our body. Now, how does it get carried? Well, you might be aware that we have something in our red blood cells called hemoglobin. And it's the hemoglobin that's made up of different groups of proteins called heme. And what happens in coronavirus is it actually dissociates the heme from the cell. So the red blood cell cannot actually carry your oxygen. Now the lung tissue has to work harder and harder while at the same time being inflamed and thickening. This is obviously a recipe for disaster. This is why coronavirus in itself is so scary. Now, how can coronavirus end up killing us? Well, most people end up developing pneumonia as a result of that thickening of the lung tissue and of this weakening by the lack of oxygen. So when our oxygen levels go down, we're no longer able to boost our immune system up quite the way it's supposed to be. And so the opportunists, the other pathogens, the other bacteria that always live inside our body and belong there, actually become able to take over the cell. So it's kind of like, while mom and dad are away, let's have a big party, okay? So the party kicks in, and unfortunately that bacterial party often induces pneumonia, and it's that pneumonia that technically ends up killing the person in the end, okay? So what are we going to do about this? Do we have drugs that are going to be effective against this? Well, this type of virus, again, is known as a retrovirus because it retroactively goes into the cell and reverses our normal ability for the cells to replicate and instead makes it self-replicate using its RNA. So there are anti-retroviral drugs. Now, we do know these exist. You've probably heard of some of these like Tamiflu when you have the flu, because the flu is also a retrovirus. There are various different types of drugs, and the adverse effects is the problem we have to worry about here. They vary with each drug. And the goal, as with any drug, is to find the best effect of the drug with the most tolerable adverse effects or side effects. Now, the problem is when it comes to the retrovirals, they can have some pretty serious side effects. So an example of this is zanamivir, okay? Now, this is not recommended for people with a history of breathing problems. Ding, 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 not good for this situation because it may worsen the breathing. Obviously not a good idea. How about Tamiflu? Tamiflu itself, okay, can lead to death, particularly by interfering with the respiratory centers of the body. So again, Tamiflu, not a good choice. Well, how about a vaccine? We keep hearing about a vaccine. We know that vaccine is going to be at least 12 to probably 18 months out. And according to the brightest minds in virology and epidemiology, it's unlikely a vaccine is going to be very effective in this situation. As a matter of fact, it actually may be more dangerous. The reason for that is in the past, when we tried to create vaccines against spiked protein viruses like this, like SARS, we found that it's over and over again extremely difficult to create a safe vaccine. And in most of the cases, most of the animals they tested with the vaccine ended up dying. So there's an extremely high mortality rate from the vaccine itself. Now, if that isn't scary enough, we know that they're fast tracking this vaccine. So that means there's not going to be much safety in regard to studies or even efficacy studies. They're going to try to get it out there as fast as possible. That, frankly, folks, scares the crap out of me. And it should be a little scary to you. So the reality is we really probably should not have to rely too heavily on medications to help us here. So what can we do? Well, we can take precautions, okay? Now, here we see this. You guys have probably seen these great memes going along Facebook. At least we're getting a lot of laughter out of this, if nothing else. And we know that we should be protecting ourselves by wearing masks, particularly because we can spread the virus to others even when we're asymptomatic and not realizing that we're carriers of it. And as you're incubating that virus in your body, you may never actually show outward symptoms. You may be like the majority of people who just has a very mild case, but you can still spread that through the air, through the tiny micro droplets of your saliva. Now we know when someone coughs or sneezes, it's very obvious. We can see that large phlegm drop to the floor in front of our faces. We want to avoid that, but what about the micro droplets you can't see? Well, it's been determined those micro droplets, those invisible droplets carrying the virus, can live in the air for up to 3 hours and extend as far as 20 feet from your body. So with that in mind, it's probably wise for us to wear masks simply so we don't spread it to other people. Another thing we want to do, and we know this, we've heard this a million times, is wash our hands and wash them very effectively. Here's another great little piece you've probably seen circulating around the internet to give you an idea of what it's like when you wash your hands. Now, this is the light blue indicates, in this case, the virus on your hands. When you do the rinse and shake, okay, when you get in there, just rinse your fingers, your hands really quickly and shake them off, you're getting very little off. Now, this is if we actually spend time just with friction alone and water with no soap. We can physically force a good amount of the virus particles off our hands, making it darker blue. Now let's add soap. Wow. Here we have a whole new story going on here, and it's just little old regular soap that we want here, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. Here's after 15 seconds of soap, and forget 20 seconds, go for the full 30. Look how much of a change we have from here to here after 30 seconds. This is one of the easiest and simplest things you could do to protect yourself. But with that in mind, the reality is, are we then not going to touch something else that may get the virus back onto our skin? We know it can live on surfaces up to 9 hours. Now, we can take all the precautions we want. We can hold our breath as long as we can. We can wash our body up and down with soap 24 times a day, okay, on the hour, every hour. But then at some point, it's likely we're going to turn around and breathe again or touch something that we may have touched in the last 9 hours that may still have the virus on it. So I'm not saying don't take these precautions, but realize that alone isn't going to save you. So as you know, we've all been told this over our lifetime, the best defense is a good offense. Exactly. So the best thing you can do is learn how to protect yourselves. So what's going to save us, as it saves anyone in any case of fighting any illness, is your immune system. An interactive network of organs, cells, and proteins that protects the body from viruses like this one, as well as bacteria and other foreign substances. So let's talk about boosting our immune system. So to first talk about boosting the immune system, we have to understand it all the way down to the cellular level. Now here we see that anatomy of the animal cell once again. Before we were talking about how the virus gets into the nucleus. Well, let's first talk about how we can stop the virus from even getting into that cell. And that's if we have a stronger exterior membrane, stronger skin on that cell. Now, if we take that and we blow it up and look over here, we actually see that exterior membrane is made up of 2 layers. And those layers are made up primarily of fats. So these little yellow squiggles you see in here are fats. The majority of them are actually cholesterol and saturated fat, as well as many omega-3 fatty acids, which if you know anything about nutrition, you know omega-3s are traditionally anti-inflammatory. So we want a good amount of omega-3s making up that cell membrane to keep our inflammation levels down and keep these channels that the virus can get through closed, okay? So your cells are made up of lots of different fats, and your cells make up your tissues. Your tissues make up your organs and glands. Your organs and glands make up your systems, and your systems make up you. So ultimately, you are your cells. So what we have to do is figure out how to make our cells stronger, particularly by making our cell membrane stronger. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. This really is probably the most powerful thing I can teach you today. I'm going to go into lots of other information, and I'm going to run through it quickly, but if you get anything out of this, you need to understand that the health of your cells determines the health of your body. The health of your cells determines the strength of your immune system. And if your cells aren't healthy, you can't be healthy. It's as simple as that. That's the entire reason why I devoted my entire life and practice at this point to becoming a certified cellular inflammation, healing, and detoxification specialist, because this is really where it's at. So what happens here? Well, this shows us in a simple graph here that your cell wall is made up of the saturated fat and cholesterol, as I just said. Now, how does our cell get signals from our immune system to tell it how to put up its defenses and how to fight? Well, that comes through antenna that we have sticking off of our cells, known as receptors. And the receptors pick up a signal, just like the radio sending a signal, the radio station sending a signal to a radio antenna, so you can actually hear that signal. So we have our antenna out there listening for the hormones and cell signaling coming from our immune system. Now, all is well and good if this is all working the way it's supposed to be, and then sends great information to our cell to keep our defenses up. Problem is, lots of things come in and actually block those cell receptors. They come in and blunt them, making them virtually inoperable, so we can't hear the signals coming from our immune system. We can't hear the signals coming from our hormones. Toxic substances will block those. So our greatest concern right now is, what are those toxic substances and how can we avoid them? Well, toxins come from things we use every single day. They're in our environment all around us. It's things that we choose to put onto our body, like makeup, soaps, and lotions. It's the things we use to clean our home. It's the things we put in our food into before we put it into the microwave, like plastic Tupperware. All these things release toxins that are disruptive to your cells individually, as well as to your hormones and your entire endocrine system, that will lead to all kinds of health problems. Toxins also come from the food that we eat, such as the things that have been put on the food we eat: insecticides, preservatives, food dyes, artificial sweeteners and additives, preservatives such as BHT, nitrites and nitrates, titanium dioxide, and of course GMOs, genetically modified organisms. The jury's still out on that, and I tend to err on the side of caution and figure out that if Mother Nature didn't make it, pretty good chance that we're not going to digest and absorb it really well. So I try to avoid those things. So you want to try to avoid these toxins. Now let's talk about your food, because even if you did everything right to get toxins out of your life, you still have to eat, right? Well, there are some things we know that are particularly damaging to our cell membranes and create inflammation. Overall, for a lot of people, many people are sensitive to dairy, and dairy proteins can create a lot of cellular inflammation. We also know, of course, many people are sensitive to wheat, and specifically not wheat itself, but what we've done to wheat. It's what we've done to the gluten of the wheat and how we've used a particular pesticide in that wheat called glyphosate. The gluten in the wheat has been changed since the 1970s to something called dwarf wheat, which happens to be twice as high in a very sweet sugar called amylopectin A, and the gluten protein in the wheat has been amplified 7 times. So it's much more strong in its gluten reactions than the wheat of our grandparents are. That's why we're seeing so many people with wheat, gluten sensitivities or celiac disease today. Now, also over here, there's that GMO again. GMO corn is something that we are all exposed to. About 95 to 97% of the corn products that we ingest are GMO corn. They're actually designed with the glyphosate built right into the seeds, called BT corn. And that glyphosate is probably the most detrimental, pervasive pesticide in use today, and it destroys the bacteria in our gut. It acts as an antibiotic, killing our good bacteria, which are a very important part of our immune system, as well as creating more irritation and inflammation to our gut lining, which then leads to whole body inflammation. Another thing is red meat. Now, not all red meat is actually evil. It's particularly commercially raised red meat, because that commercially raised red meat was raised on GMO corn, okay? So that red meat then has a completely different chemistry than, say, cows that were allowed to be pasture raised and actually eat grass that they were designed to eat, as well as not being injected with antibiotics and hormones. Another thing is fried foods. Fried foods particularly give us something called trans fats, which means hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils. And trans fats stick to our cell membranes and damage our receptors. Picture, if you will, that your cell membranes are a lot like a screen on a window in your home. It's supposed to let air travel in and out. Now, take that screen and dip it in a vat of French fry grease. Pull it back out. What do the holes look like now? All those holes are clogged. Well, that's actually what's happening to your cell membranes holes when you eat fried food. Those trans fats literally clog your cell membranes. And sadly, they stay there for quite some time. It takes an average of 151 days for your body to eliminate the vast majority of some trans fats that you ate today. And the last thing I want to talk about is refined sugar. And come on, folks, Let's be honest. We all know sugar is not good for us. As a matter of fact, sugar is simply not good for anybody, particularly our immune system. It's been proven over and over that we know that sugar is the primary fuel for cancer cells. And the more sugar we eat, the more we're generating disease in our body. Now, the sad thing is that sugar isn't just table sugar. Sugar comes from any form of carbohydrate that we eat, particularly simple carbohydrates, and even proteins. Our body breaks our food, our proteins, fats, and carbohydrates down to fuel. That fuel only comes in two sources: glucose, which is sugar, or ketones, which is fat. Now, fat becomes fat, it becomes ketones, but carbohydrates and proteins become sugar. Now, I'm not saying that we don't want to eat those ever, but we want to really cut back on those simple sugars that are spiking up our inflammation very, very quickly. Let's talk about good fats versus bad fats. So we just talked about, obviously, we don't want fried foods. So we don't want, in the bad fat category, any of that trans fat, hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils. And these include things like cottonseed oils, soybean oil. No, soybean is not a health food. And vegetable oils. Trans fats like margarine. There we go, fooling Mother Nature again. It never works out well. Shortening, synthetic butters. Rancid oils like corn oil or canola oil. And again, don't be fooled, folks. Canola oil is not a healthy oil, no matter what the food industry wants you to believe. It is a genetically modified form of rapeseed oil, which in of itself is bad for you. It's made in Canada, so it's called Canadian oil, canola. Another thing we want to stay away from is that conventionally raised beef and farm-raised fish, okay? Farm-raised fish, again, just like commercially raised beef, is fed absolute garbage. As a matter of fact, when the fish die off from disease, they chop them up and feed them back to the other fish. And that's what that fish meat, so to speak, is being made out of, and that's what you're consuming. Let's instead have healthy fats. So what are our choices? Coconut oil, medium chain triglyceride oil, or MCT oil, the fats that come from raw nuts, monounsaturated fats like avocado, or extra virgin olive oil. Now, right here is a tip that most people I find out don't know, that you should never, ever cook with olive oil. Olive oil has a very low smoke point. What that means is it will go rancid upon heating. So if you put olive oil in your pan and then cook with it, you actually took a healthy oil and just turned it into a rancid, bad fat. You should only use olive oil as a drizzle on top of your food or as a dip. Full fat dairy products from organic animals do not seem to have an inflammatory process. Things like organic butter, ghee, or yogurt. Grass-fed meats, wild-caught fish, free-range chicken, poultry, eggs. So, big question. If we know all these things cause inflammation of our cell membranes, and we know our cell membranes are of utmost importance when it comes to controlling and directing our immunity, don't you think it's a good idea for us to understand the health of our cell membranes? Well, how are we supposed to know that? Easy, really easy. There's a very simple test called an omega-3 index test. There are lots of different labs that do this. We do it right here in our office all the time. It's a very simple test. It takes 10 minutes. But to me, it is probably the single most important thing that any of us can do to determine our true levels of health, because it's the level of the health of our cells. Now, when we actually get a good omega-3 index study done, it will show you different kinds of reports. And it's going to show you the ratio of the inflammatory factors to the anti-inflammatory, the ratio of the different types of fats like arachidonic acid versus eicosapentaenoic acid. Very, very important to understand. Is your cell membrane inflammation, if it's there, coming from diet? Is it coming from toxins? So that you can learn how to better take care of yourself. You also want to look at the most common toxins. That same test should show you your trans fats and show you how much of your screens being blocked. Very easy to do, folks. There's no reason not to. The average test costs between about $100 and about $200. It's not too bad. All right, now let's talk about, we talked before briefly about our microbiome and how glyphosate destroys our good bacteria in our body. And the majority of that bacteria in our body that's controlling our immune system is found inside our gut, known as our gut microbiome. And that is controlling not only our immune system, but it's controlling our reaction to infectious diseases like this virus, as well as controlling our neurologic system. There's a gut-brain connection. Our gut bacteria actually talk to our brain, and the DNA in our gut talks to the DNA in our brain cells and actually makes decisions for us. This is getting scary. Most people don't realize that you're really not in control of your body. It's the bacteria and the other microbes that live in your body that are more in control of your body. As a matter of fact, if we look at the cells of our body and what we're actually made up of, our body is about 90% microbes and only about 10% human cells. That's mind-blowing. It is to me, and I think it should be to you too. So when we're out here using all these antibacterial hand soaps and washes, and we're trying to do all we can to kill off our bacteria, well, that to me, folks, is slow suicide, because you are bacteria. It's a symbiotic relationship. We take care of each other. Now, if the gut microbiome is also screwed up, it can mess up our metabolic function and lead to other metabolic diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, cancer, liver diseases, and inflammatory diseases. Yep, that's me. And look at that smile. Okay, I threw that in there because just to have fun for one, but also because I want to explain something. We talk a lot about balancing our microbiome, and we know most of it lives down inside our gut, and we know what end of our body that's on. Well, what's the other end of that same tube? That's right, it's your mouth. And so your microbiome actually starts in your mouth, not all the way down the bottom of your gut or your intestines. Your gut actually means your intestines, your stomach, all of your throat, into your nose and your mouth. That's all your gut, all even to your sinuses. So the microbiome starts in your mouth. And most people don't realize they're actually destroying the good protective bacteria from the get-go. We have bacteria in our mouth that are supposed to be there to protect us from where most things get in that big hole that we have in our face. So we have to have proper bacterial balance in our mouth microbiome, our oral microbiome, in order to protect us. Now, most of the toothpastes that we're using that have whitening agents, that have agents to kill the bacteria that cause bad breath, that have high amounts of fluoride, all these things destroy the good bacteria in your mouth and start to disrupt your microbiome and lower your immune function. A good option instead is to use something like a charcoal-based fluoride-free toothpaste. All right, so let's talk about our top immune boosters. Now, I'm going to fly through some of this stuff because this is stuff that you guys can actually pretty much look up anywhere. This is stuff that you don't need me to tell you. And if you do want to get in more detail, I actually have a list of various nutrients, vitamins, herbs that are extremely important to help balance and boost your immune system, and particularly things that are antiviral, things that we know will actually stop viruses in their tracks. And there's 3 ways you can stop a virus. You can stop it from getting into your cells, you can stop it from replicating inside of your nucleus, and you can stop it from getting out of the cells. And there are excellent herbs and nutrients that do that. So there's absolutely ways you can protect yourself and even help yourself heal once the virus has taken hold. I'm not going to go over these right now. You can get a copy of this presentation when we're done and learn all about them. One thing I am going to talk about is our vitamin D levels. We all know vitamin C is important for our immune system, but what about vitamin D? Vitamin D is probably the most important vitamin for your immune system because it controls and coordinates the vast majority of your immune function. The funny thing is, vitamin D is not even a vitamin. It was misnamed. It's actually a hormone. And hormones are chemical messengers. And this particular hormone is telling your body how to activate your immune system and how to heal and repair. Now, some people already know their vitamin D levels. If you don't, I encourage you to please get those checked. Again, that's something that we do here all the time as first and foremost when I'm dealing with a person in order to help them be their healthiest, because if your vitamin D levels aren't up, nothing else is going to work really well. So most people are told that as long as their vitamin D levels are above 30, they're okay, when in fact, anything below 50 is deficient. Optimal is 50 to 70. And if you're actually dealing with a disease process, and especially something serious, you really want that vitamin D level up more like 70 to 100. And scary, scary, scary as it is, most of the people that I see when I test their vitamin D, they are below 20. So these people are walking, ticking time bombs. All right, let's move forward. Can vitamin C help? Of course it can help. We know that. As a matter of fact, if we look at studies, we can see that high dose vitamin C is being used right now to even reverse this virus in many people. It's going to be a lot more than what you would normally be able to take on your own. You'd have to take an awful lot. So this is being done by IV. But that being said, we know that taking vitamin C up to 5,000 milligrams or 5 grams per day helps to naturally upregulate the white blood cells that our immune system uses to actually attack and kill viruses. So I recommend doing it. Here are some other nutrients that I recommended and their dosages. Now, I do want to talk about the most important thing I think I'm going to talk about after our cell inflammation levels is this right here, that the coronavirus is much worse than we think. And why do I say that? Because if you're paralyzed by the fear of being infected by this virus, you've already been infected. You've been infected by the fear mongering that the media has purported upon you, the anxiety. It's even causing depression. people, I mean, we have a reason to be afraid, but not the level that I'm seeing going around us. The coronavirus is certainly affecting our minds more than it's affecting our lungs. And my background, as you heard in the beginning, is in psychophysiology, the mind-body connection, understanding how stress affects the body and the immune system. So really, if we break that down, that category of learning is known as psychoneuroimmunology. Now, psychoneuroimmunology or psychoneuroendocrinology is a culmination of understanding that what we think and the stress that we experience has a direct impact on our nervous system, on our immune system, on our endocrine or hormone system. This is where you can make probably the biggest difference day by day. This is what you can do today, is you can start to do things to try to relieve your anxiety. You can start to do things to start to de-stress and take the balance back, okay? When we become anxious or stressed, we know that the gland in our body that controls our hormones, that control our stress, is our adrenal glands. And when our adrenal glands get fired up because we're feeling anxious and stressed, that can directly affect our immune system through chemical messengers called cytokines and hormones, and that will lower our immune system. We also see it can directly affect our nervous system, the master controller of everything in our body. This then can lead to even more anxiety and depression and insomnia, which leads to more depression of our immune system, which leaves us open to more inflammation and more infections, such as an infection by the coronavirus. Now, research shows in laboratory studies that even short-term stressors, such as making a speech, are shown to inhibit an effective immune system response as little as 5 minutes. How long have I been talking? Okay, I guess that means if I was stressed by this, I would actually be in big trouble right now. The good news is I don't mind talking. You probably figured that out. And this doesn't stress me out. But for how many people does it? In as little as 5 minutes, it lowers your immune function, okay? Now, we do know that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. So when we have acute stressors, it actually upregulates our immune system for a short period of time. So if your body is faced with a threat, then we're going to naturally see our immune system ramp up, okay? It's making us stronger. The problem is when that becomes chronic, when that becomes persistent, it then starts to break our immune system down. So initially, at the onset of stress, we're going to get stronger, okay? Now, this is in the first days, hours, weeks. Now, as this goes on for weeks to months, kind of where we are now, what starts to happen? We start dropping down and our immune system becomes severely depressed from this chronic stress. So this is something we have to act on and act on it quick. Now, we talked about psycho or stress emotionally. What about physical stress to our body and what that does to our nervous system? That's the neuro part of psychoneuroimmunology. When things impact our nervous system directly through exterior forces, that too can cause dramatic changes to our immune system. And how is our psychological system affected or connected to our physiological system? Through our nervous system. Our brain goes into our spinal cord right inside your spine, which is why chiropractors thrive in today's environment, because chiropractors are helping you thrive, because chiropractic care corrects imbalances in your spine. Most people don't realize that chiropractic care was never designed to help you feel well. It was really designed to help you heal well, because chiropractic care has been shown in studies to improve your health, sleep, stress, happiness, well-being, immune system, strength, mobility, and decrease things such as disease and illness, okay? So this is exactly why I'm still open. This is why I'm doing half days to help to contribute to social distancing, but at the same time, I am essential. I am here every day giving chiropractic adjustments to help people's immune system strengthen by lessening the stress to the nervous system and lessening their stress and anxiety. Also, here at the Biohack Zone, we use some other tools that we help to decrease your stress, and these are things that you can try to work on at home as well. So here, we want to distress you physically. Now, we can do that through adjustments, but we also can use our cool technology here, like our hydro massage tables. This is like a jacuzzi, but you don't get wet. So it uses rotating warm water jets to relax the muscles of your body in a rhythmic motion that further relaxes your nervous system. We then also help you de-stress mentally by putting special headsets on you that play music that's designed with special beats and tones and frequencies to rapidly and deeply decrease the stress in your brain. Basically gives the equivalent of a 3-hour power nap in 15 minutes. So how can you do this at home? Well, you can sit quietly and meditate. You can listen to your favorite soft music. You can get a massage from someone else at home, or use a tennis ball up against the wall to work out those knots and tangles, but you have to do things to relax your body and brain. Here at the Biohack Zone, we actually take it a step further, and we use this tool right here, which is a infrared sauna wrap using far infrared rays that actually helps your body de-stress chemically and forces the toxins that are damaging your cells out through your sweat glands, and it also heats you up from the inside to a temperature that actually kills off pathogens such as this virus. So this room right here is probably the most important room in my office right now. Is the one that people are using the most. It's our de-stress center, so they can come in and actually use our technology to de-stress physically, mentally, and chemically to help protect themselves. Now let's talk about exercise. Exercise is really important too. And as a matter of fact, when we are sedentary and don't exercise, such as what most of us are doing right now in our quarantine, is we see our risk of upper respiratory tract infections like corona goes tremendously up. So we need to get just moderate exercise. Get out there and walk, breathe the fresh air, get the vitamin D from the sunshine. Do moderate exercise in order to increase your immune resistance. What we don't want to do is just like that curve we saw before with emotional stress taking its toll if it went on too long. Well, physical stress in the form of exercise will also take its toll if it goes on too long, and we overtrain. So if you push too hard right now and exercise all day long, that's also going to raise your risk of developing an immune system decline or immunosuppression and infection with disease. So how do we address that in the Biohack Zone? Well, we use really cool technology to make sure you get an optimum workout without overtraining. We have our system over here called the Toned in 10 Minutes system, which takes you through resistance exercise training on a vibration platform that makes your muscles work 5 times harder than if you did the same thing on the floor, while at the same time increasing your human growth hormone release. What that does is give you amplified results in a very minimum amount of time. So instead of working out for 50 minutes, you only have to work out for 10. Over on this side, we have a very special tool called CAROL, which stands for Cardiovascular Optimization Logic. And this is a cardio exercise bike that is not your average bike. It is our Fit in 40 Seconds system, and it actually gives your heart and lungs the equivalent of a 45-minute hard run or spin class in just 8 minutes, including 40 seconds of intensity. The rest of the time is actually recovery. Sounds crazy, I know, but that's the beauty of science and technology. That's why we call it biohacking. Biohacking means using scientific shortcuts to rapidly improve your health and performance, and that's what we do for you here. So basically, we take your 90 minutes in the gym down to less than 20 minutes. So what can you do at home? You can go out and do some exercise. You can do calisthenics. You can do push-ups. You can do sit-ups. You can go for a walk, okay? These are all things that you can do, but do them within a moderation level, not overdoing it.
Dr. Weil, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Can I give you the 5-minute warning?
You can, and I'll talk
Thank you.
even faster. Okay.
Okay.
Sleep. Why is sleep important? Because sleep is when we actually brainwash. This is when we actually cleanse our brain of toxins. When we go to sleep in our deepest sleep cycles, our brain starts to reduce the blood flow and increase the cerebrospinal fluid that washes the toxins right out of our brain. That helps our brain stay healthy and helps keep our immune system up, as well as doing things like help us stay safe from coronavirus. That same headset that we use here in the Biohack Zone does the same thing for you in 15 minutes. And we know it also physically restores you. And at the bottom here, we see strengthens your immune system. So sleep does that by releasing different chemicals during that sleep process that actually helps to keep us stronger hormones, proteins, chemicals that fight off disease. The more sleep deprived we are, if we get less than 7 hours, we see our sleep starts to affect our immune function. As a matter of fact, if you take 4 hours out of your regular sleep cycle on any given night, your immune system drops by about 70% for a couple of hours, and then down to as much as 30% for about 3 days. One other way you can boost your immunity is through using red light. Now, red light is something that we also use here in the office. That red light, like the far infrared in the sauna, pre-detoxification, near infrared actually works through your bowels and your kidneys to detoxify you and flush things into the toilet. So red light therapy is another option for you to use. Where's another place we get red light from? The sun, okay? So just again, walking outside is gonna shine that red light down into your cells, even though you can't see it. And inside the cells are these little critters called mitochondria, and that's where our body actually produces the energy to keep our cells alive. And what the energy is called is ATP. And when we have red light hit our cells directly, such as the use with red light therapy or laser, that massively increases the amount of ATP, so your cells become much stronger and able to defend you. Again, top 5 benefits of red light therapy: increased immunity, So what are some other scientifically approved health benefits of things like red light therapy? Increasing your sleep, which again, we indicated just a moment ago, helps your immune system. Helps your body increase proper thyroid function, which controls your metabolism. Boosts your brain health, which controls everything, including your immune function. We also see that it increases and decreases nerve and cellular damage and increases nerve conductivity and helps reduce inflammation. So there again, there you have it. It kind of comes all around full circle. It's all about inflammation. We've got to get that inflammation down. So folks, in closing, I can't believe I got this down as fast as I did, so I'm sorry if I spoke very quickly. But in closing, I want us to stop stressing. We have to just relax a little bit. We have to realize this isn't going to be around forever, and we're going to get through. As a matter of fact, right now we're seeing that a lot of the death numbers we're seeing are being attributed to people dying from anything and calling it corona related. Okay, and now that's a gross miscalculation. So we're seeing numbers that are much higher than they should be. What we need to keep in mind is that really about 82% of these cases have been and will continue to be mild, requiring little to no medical intervention. That means if you get it, it's very likely that you're going to be just fine. So stop stressing out about it. Okay, I have to make sure I get enough oxygen in. All right, now, last page right here. If you'd like a copy of this presentation or a list of targeted antiviral supplements that I give out to my patients that I can send you by email, very simple. Send me an email to thebiohackzone@gmail.com. And all you have to do is in the subject line, put your name and then put the words copy if you want a copy of this presentation so you can read everything a little bit more closely. Test if you want to know more about how can you get one of those cellular inflammation tests and how to get that done. And list if you'd like that list of targeted antiviral supplements sent to you. You can get all 3, 1, 2, whatever you'd like. For more information about how I can help you now or in the future, you can go to thebiohack.zone and learn all more about our Cellular Healing Center, or to wildwellnessconsulting.com, which is specifically for my functional medicine practice. Okay. Whew! You survived. We all survived and will continue to survive. Thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to speak.
That was awesome. You're speaking my language, Dr. Wild. We appreciate you. Thank you. So I want to open it up to everybody to ask questions. And the way that you can do that, I would love for everybody to come on if you're comfortable. If not, you can drop it into the chat. But I would love for you just to hit the participant button, and down at the bottom, there's a little button that says raise hand. So go down and raise your hand and then unmute yourself and ask your question. Or I will, if there's too many people on, I'll try to guide it. Let's see, Fran, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you so much. This was so informative. I was writing furiously and wanted you, if you wouldn't mind, repeat the pesticide in corn that kills good bacteria. You had some really good facts about that, and I wanted to hear it again.
Sure, Fran. That's called glyphosate. And that's the main ingredient in Roundup. And you may be aware that there's been some recent court case activity where various types of cancer have been attributed specifically to that. It's really a drug. I'll call it a drug. It really is a drug because it's also an antibiotic. So glyphosate is on all of our grain products. It's on our potatoes, our sweet potatoes, even our nuts, our grapes. And sadly, because most of our farms, our organic farms, are very close to conventional farms, even when the conventional farm uses this glyphosate material, it gets absorbed into the water table and goes over to the organic farm too, or it travels through the air and overspray. So even when they test organic foods, we're still finding it there, which is really, really scary. Now, granted, it's in much lower doses, so that it's always better to go organic, but the reality is we can't get away from it. So that's why in my practice, we use very specific, deep cellular cleansing detoxification protocols to actually get the glyphosate out of your body appropriately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A scary fact about that, you probably know this, Dr. Wild, that out in the Midwest where, big crops are sprayed over, hundreds of thousands of acres, they actually have been finding glyphosate in the umbilical cords of newborns.
Yes.
In certain areas of the country. So that's kind of scary,
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Fran. Vicki, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Dr. Wild. That was really fascinating. I'm curious, or if you have any ideas, since this is not as contagious as a lot of other things, and even its death rate is not as terrifying as a lot of other things, why have we gone so crazy? Why has the media just, I mean, presidential news conferences every day, just, I'm just curious about what's different about this than the other viruses that you listed there.
Great question, Vicki. I ask myself that every day. And of course, if you listen to my friend Jim in New Jersey, this is one great conspiracy. And the stuff he tells me gets scarier every day because I start seeing some of it come true. So I'm starting to become a little bit of a believer. I don't know. I'm a little concerned here. I really don't know. You know, I think that initially the reports came out and started creating such mass hysteria that now it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And of course, the media is going to continue to plug what sells, and they're going to bark louder, watch me, watch me, watch me. And then also our government then has to address that because it's become a monster. And so we start having these daily reports and these stats on the computer every day of cases and deaths. And I've got to say, I think that is probably the worst thing that could have ever happened. I think that in of itself, because of the psychological stress it creates and the effect on the immune system with suppressing it, that is by far the most dangerous aspect of this entire scenario.
And I worry that it's making us sicker, you know?
It is. There's no way it's not. I agree with you.
I mean, do you have any, I know this is an impossible question, but I'll put it out there anyway, that if we had done nothing, if we had treated it like we treat the flu every year, do you have any sense of what it might look like? Or tell me that all this quarantining really is making a difference.
How much time do we have? Okay. So I actually don't agree with the quarantining the way it's being done. I looked to some Harvard researchers who came out with a study right when our governor locked us down through June. Thank you very much, because I'm supposed to go on vacation in June. Hopefully it'll all be gone. But right when he did that, at the same time, a group of Harvard researchers came out with a study that showed that the more thorough the quarantine, the more strict the lockdown, the more death and disease we will have when we come out. Why? Because how does your immune system develop immunity in the first place? We have two different kinds of immune function: innate, which you're born with, and acquired, which is developed. Primarily, innate is controlled by your white blood cells. So when something gets in your body, your white blood cells, we have different kinds. T cells will target that. They'll then cause other cells, such as macrophages and natural killer cells, to attack and kill the foreign invading organism. If they're not able to do it on their own, they'll activate B cells, which then make antibodies. Those antibodies will then come in and attack. So the antibodies become part of the acquired immunity. So we had to acquire those after being exposed, right? Now that's the idea behind vaccination. That's what we hope vaccination does, is prompt an acquired immunity. However, to this day, that's still an extremely imperfect science and has never really worked all that well. Just look at last year's flu vaccine. The CDC's own reports and the National Institute of Health came out and said that the flu vaccine last year was only 8% effective in boosting anybody's immunity against the flu. That means 92% ineffective. And they've been making flu vaccines for a long time. So they've got that science down pretty good. And they're using that same science to make this vaccine. So I don't have a whole lot of faith that that's going to do anything for us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vicki. Somebody else. Anne, did you have your hand raised? Is she gone? Looks like she might be gone. Anybody else have questions? We can always, if you'll have his information, Jessica will include all of that information for the slide deck, or any other contact information we'll include on the wrap up. Let's see. If you have questions or announcements you want us to know about, just make sure you send Jessica an email at jessica@narrichmond.com by noon on Monday, so we can include it, and it'll go out on Tuesday to everyone. And real quick before we wrap up, just a reminder that the next Healthy Mornings will be on Friday, May 8th. So go ahead and put it on your calendar. And we would love to think that it would be in person, but most likely it'll be on another Zoom call, so we can make it then. And I found this poem to kind of send us out on. It's by Senator Cory Booker. And he says, "We can't touch, but we but we still reach out. We hunker down, but we still rise up. Our bodies are attacked. Oops, hang on, something just happened. Our bodies are attacked, but our spirits fight back. The enemy is invisible, but so many of our heroes are now seen. Weeks and weeks of isolation, but still infinite and invincible determination. We are distant, but we stand together, and together we shall overcome. I thought that was kind of uplifting. I liked Jessica's as well. That was a really nice one, Jess, by the way. That was great. So thank you, Dr. Wild. We appreciate all your information. I'm sorry, everybody, if we've gone over a little bit today, but we thought it was really great content and wanted to share it with everyone. So again, if you have questions or want to share anything, make sure to get Jessica an email by noon on Monday. Otherwise, stay well, and we hope to see you next month.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
Everyone, everybody.
Bye.
Dr. Wild.